Stuff, Abigail, and of course we'll talk a little bit more about Tesla and Solar City shortly.
Well, all eyes, though, are on Europe as the UK votes on a Brexit tomorrow, but ramifications of the referendum will be more far-reaching than any one continent. And given that London is the biggest gateway for international travel to Europe, a UK separation could create a storm of regulatory headaches. Well, joining us now for more is JoelBrandon-Bravo. He's Travelzoo's UK Managing Director. Recently, Travelzoo surveyed about 8,000 members from various countries like UK, Italy, France, Spain, the U.S. What was your biggest takeaway from that?
Well, the biggest takeaway for us was the impact that the European markets that we surveyed had on whether Britain leaving Europe would have an impact on them visiting the UK. So roughly around 30% of Spain and Italy and Germany and 25% of France said they'd be less likely to visit the UK. So that equates to about $4 billion of revenue for the UK tourism industry. So that was probably the biggest shock. And actually even as far away as Canada and the US also said that us leaving the EU might impact their decision to visit.
What about UK tourists going to Europe, continental Europe?
Well, that's certainly one of the concerns. I think the first thing to remember is that if we did vote to leave, then there would be 2 years with no changes in legislation. But the short-term impact, pretty much everyone is predicting that if we do vote to leave, then the pound will lose its value against the euro. And what that means is Brits going abroad on holiday this summer are likely to find prices higher. Also, the airlines have universally come out, the CEOs of EasyJet, Monarch and Ryanair, all saying that they think leaving will lead to higher prices and less competition from the airlines.
Is there any sign that UK visitors to other parts of Europe would have to pay more taxes once they're there? Anything along those lines?
Well, again, certainly not for 2 years. There wouldn't be any changes to the tax situation. After that, actually, who's to say? There's a lot of unknowns in here, and certainly how England or Brits going abroad would be taxed when going abroad after that 2-year period is a big unknown.
What about the fall that we may see in sterling? Could that sort of draw visitors from U.S. and Canada over to the U.K., perhaps?
That is a potential upside. Obviously, a fall in currency would make visiting Britain cheaper. So for domestic tourism, that might well be a short-term boon. Something that may counteract that is actually the leisure industry is a big employer from the EU, and that labour coming in. I mean, in London, it's as much as 70% of the workforce in hospitality is a migrant workforce. Now, obviously, if that changes, if we have to offer higher wages to attract UK employees, that might counteract the benefit of any currency drop by putting prices up for domestic tourism.
That's a really good point. How about travelers from Asia? Obviously, the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in travelers from China, and Japanese tourists are very fond of visiting the UK, but we know that the Japanese yen has been a safe haven for those who are worried about the Brexit possibility.
Yeah, one factor that the British have found as a disadvantage of being outside of the Schengen agreement is that actually the Chinese and Asian tourists are typically travelling to Europe more than they do Britain, simply because they can get one visa that will allow them to visit multiple countries. Britain decided to stay outside of Schengen despite being in the EU, and that has hurt us. That has meant less Chinese visitors coming to London.
Did you take the pulse of if Europe, the EU, wanted the UK to stay part of the EU? Did you take that poll at all?
Yeah, we asked that question as well, and pretty overwhelmingly, it was around 70% on average for the other European markets. All wanted Britain to stay, not only just because they don't want to see Britain leave, but I think there's maybe a worry that if Britain leave, there is some kind of anti-European sentiment in other countries in Europe, and maybe there's also a worry that there may be some domino effect if Britain were to leave.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope there.
Joel, great to get your perspective. Thank you very much. JoelBrandon-Bravo, Managing Director for